I just want to say hi to everyone that is watching the recorded version of this. Thank you for signing up for the class. And if you're here from Patreon, thank you for watching and supporting. I'm going to start letting people in, and then I'm going to let it sit for a couple of minutes. So you'll have like 3 or 4 minutes of silence to fast forward through. So here we go. Awesome. Hello to everyone that is here so far. A couple minutes early. I'm just getting things fired up and waiting for my water to start boiling. So I just did like a little pre-spiel on the recording for the people that are watching in the future. I'm going to give it a couple minutes and see if the waiting room fills up again, and then just get everybody admitted. So we are already recording. Hope everybody's had an awesome weekend. All right. Awesome. Hello, hello. So if you guys are here from the Belladonna class last month, or if you took the Belladonna class, welcome back and thank you. Really cool to be able to be here with all of you guys and see everyone. And yeah, talk about Datura or Datura, however you like to say it, depending on where you're at. And I'll have questions at the end. If anything goes crazy, or if there's something that you have a question on and you need to interrupt me, or I don't know, something falls apart, just feel free to turn your audio off or on and stop me, because once I get going, I'll just kind of go until I'm done. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Got my laptop here without any fancy apparatus, which is probably going to get me in trouble someday, but I think we're all good. Got everyone in here. I did send out an email that was basically just the notes that I'm going to go over. You guys will all get a link to the recording as well. So you'll have all of it on audio, in addition to the hard copy of the notes. Basically what I'll be going over just to get the juices flowing, and I'll kind of add my own little input throughout, because I do have more things to say than what I wrote down. And there is a slideshow that I have that goes along with it, but it's not anything that you need to follow along or really even worry about. So I'm gonna make all my noises. And get rid of that. All right, looks like we are good to go. A couple more people just popped into the waiting room, so we'll let them in. Maybe. There we go. So Datura seems to be like one of the most popular of the poisonous plants. At least there's kind of a running joke on the Poisoners Apothecary discussion group that it's really a discussion group for Datura because everybody loves to talk about it and share pictures of it, and it just seems to be like the most popular kind of one in our group. So there's definitely a reason for that. And as we'll see kind of going throughout the notes, Datura has a lot of different varieties, and it is utilized around the world in all sorts of different ways, from medicinal uses to ceremonial uses to being used in folk magic, witchcraft, plant spirit healing, all of that. So this class was mainly going to be focused on Datura stramonium, just because that is typically the one that's the most associated with European witchcraft, I guess. But really, looking even at their origins, like there's debate as to like where Datura really started, which one is the first one, and kind of where all of the other ones branched out from. But in reality, they all have like basically the same chemical compounds, the same action, a lot of the same ceremonial uses, as we'll see with some of the more individual varieties, looking at, for example, like Datura metal being India Datura associated with the deity Shiva. So specifically to connect with that spirit. But as a plant ally, I mean, you could still connect to Shiva working with Datura stramonium. So a lot of this is more focused on stramonium. I might mention some of the others, but really we're talking about like magical ritual uses, unless I'm pointing out like a specific culture or historical kind of document of like a traditional indigenous use where it's connected to like a specific variety of the plant and a specific group of people. It's all kind of just general. We'll see a lot of patterns start to kind of develop too in looking at the different types of Datura. And we'll see a lot of the different aspects kind of come out that we typically hear spoken of when describing the plant spirit and its energy and the different things that it is good at. It's often referred to as a shapeshifter and a trickster. And I think that that is definitely the case. Depending on where we look, it could be embodied as a grandmother spirit. So being very wise, very ancient, just depicted as sort of a wise old grandmother. Then if we go to the other side of the world, we get more of the ecstatic, shamanic, looking at different like yogi traditions and things like that. It sort of takes on a little bit more of a, for lack of a better word, like ecstatic, moving around, stimulating, dancing, Shiva being like the god of ecstasy and intoxication and a number of other things. It just has a very kind of fiery personality in that part of the world. But then we see this very grandmotherly spirit throughout North and South America. Looking into Europe, very much associated with the devil, devil's apple. A lot of origin stories kind of trace Datura to the Romani people, or what was being referred to at the time as gypsies, that would have brought the seeds, the plant, and the knowledge from Eastern Europe via like an Indo-European origin again. So lots of different kind of ways that this plant manifests. So I think when we kind of get to the root of it, it is definitely a grandmother spirit. It is also a very fiery, sometimes Mars-like or martial and aggressive sort of spirit. And other times we see like more of the lunar and nocturnal, um, very, very ethereal and ghost-like, and all of these different kind of figures that represent this one sort of group of plants. Just looking at some of the scientific names, a few of the different varieties, we can say that there's quite a few different hybrids. And then if we start looking at Brugmansia as well, it just kind of blows up and goes crazy. And there's all of these different awesome Brugmansia groups on Facebook, where people are growing like really beautiful hybrids. Some of them do them in glass houses. Other people are able to grow outside year round. So Brugmansia is very much like a hobby kind of a plant. So just sort of infinite varieties. So we've got Datura stramonium, which is the main one that we're kind of talking about. There's a few sub varieties of that, where we've got the Tatula, which you'll see probably some pictures of that floating around. It's got more of the violet in the center of its flower. Don't have any on this slideshow. Datura stramonium ferox. So even some of these other varieties are kind of under the umbrella of stramonium. And then we have Datura metel, which is referred to as Indian thornapple. So originating in India, and it's likely that that is probably kind of the parent species for a lot of the other ones. And there are a lot of hybrids of metel and similarities between metel and the next two being Datura inoxia, Datura wrighti, with just like some slight variations on their chemistry, but not a whole lot. Some of the common names that we hear referring to Datura, Datura stramonium in particular, of course, thornapple, Jimson weed, devil's apple, or manzana del diablo. We have it in German as well, Teufelsapfel, zombie cucumber. This is in reference to its use as an ingredient in the Haitian zombie formula. So utilizing the scopolamine from the Datura plant in combination with the tetrodotoxin from the pufferfish and a number of other ingredients to kind of create a hypnotic, manipulative sort of situation. But I don't know if that's not necessarily been written about in a while, by me anyway. Yeah, zombie cucumber is one of the names. Sorcerer's herb, Jamestown weed again. So we have the story of the British soldiers that landed in Virginia and accidentally ate the Datura leaves and went crazy for a few days. Different accounts on that. And we just actually had that happen recently. I think it was in Australia, where some Datura leaves somehow got mixed into the spinach crop or the spinach harvest, and so some people went to the food shops and got their spinach, and yeah, so you have heard about it. Some people have heard about that. So Datura made a cameo in the news recently because of the spinach. Just a few other names. We have a Mayan name, which translates to little plant in the direction of the gods. So as we'll see in a lot of Spanish-speaking places throughout South America, even up into North America, the different Native American groups here, there's a much different association with Datura, in that it doesn't have like this sort of dark weirdness that it seems to kind of absorb from other parts of the world. So very much a plant of connecting with the ancestors, the gods, just sort of divine communication and insight and inspiration. So very much, something that we would consider as, connecting with the spirit world, or what we would even consider, like celestial, kind of getting away from that idea of it being this extremely dark thing, because it's definitely a very dualistic plant. And just a few of the other common names, which you guys can read on your own because those are all over the place. Here we go. These first few slides are just some little promo things that I put together, and I thought they were part of the slideshow, but they're not. So those are up there. Datura is an annual plant growing to about 1 meter tall with many forked branches. So this is kind of an interesting thing with Datura. If you pay attention to the way that it grows, with the exception of maybe Datura rhydi, which can sometimes be a little bit more like ambly and viney, they're often like in complete symmetry. So the flowers are very, very symmetrical. The stems are very symmetrical, growing in opposition to one another. And the leaves do the same thing. I think I had. Okay, I didn't do a very good job putting this slideshow together because I do have a picture of the little baby leaves, and they come out in pairs and they kind of alternate. And there'll be 2 pairs going one way and then 2 pairs going the other way, and they just kind of create this really symmetrical balance. So there is a very kind of grounding aspect to working with Datura. Being a Saturnian herb, while it is psychoactive or entheogenic, it also has this very grounding side to it as well. We'll look at the root systems and see that Daturas do have very heavy, substantial, and fast-growing roots. So helping to kind of support through some of these more dramatic kind of transition periods, while also kind of offering grounding, which we don't always see with a lot of entheogenic plants and fungi. You know, they may get you to where you need to go, but then as far as getting back, you're kind of on your own. Where with Datura, you get a little bit more balance and a little bit more grounding. The white trumpet-shaped flowers grow upright, and they are the smallest of the Datura flowers. So speaking specifically of Datura stramonium being the smallest. Datura stramonium is probably the one that looks the most wild or the most feral, or the most like a weed. So that makes it a little special too. It's not so much an ornamental like we see with Datura metal. But the trumpet-shaped flowers point upwards. So that's where they get the name Devil's Trumpet. So their trumpets point up from hell. Just remember that. Brugmansia, a very close relative, or angel's trumpet, typically we see those pointing downwards, you know, hanging really low because they are so big and heavy. But the angel's trumpets are pointing down from heaven. So kind of an interesting just way to remember those, that they are 2 different names. A lot of times, you know, people will refer to Datura commonly as angel's trumpet, but I like to keep the distinction. The variety Datura stramonium tatula, with the pale violet flowers and purple stems. The stems of all stramonium are smooth, so we'll see with some species that they do have a violet color. Datura metal, Datura stramonium tatula, they all have kind of that splotchiness that I associate with hemlock, that also has the same splotching, which is referred to as the mark of Cain. So just kind of an interesting bit of lore there. So I always like any kind of plants that have the purple splotchy stems, because it's sort of a nod to Cain, the first farmer, which is an important kind of spiritual figure in poison plant lore. The fruits of this species grow upward and are covered in densely packed short thorns. So in some of the species, they're a little bit softer, but once they dry out, they become like little needles. Datura stramonium, these seeds are black and kidney-shaped. Sometimes you'll get a few seeds that aren't completely mature, and those are still kind of a tan color. But with the stramonium varieties, the seeds are typically black. Some of the other varieties, Mattel, Anoxia, those are going to still be the same shape, but they're a different color. They're a lighter tan. Like I mentioned earlier, the origin of the Datura species is a matter of debate. The oldest being Datura Mattel, which is traced to India. So this being kind of the oldest human use evidence of the plant being used by a group of people would have been the Datura Mattel in India. And so it's likely that a lot of the other varieties, if not all of them, kind of sprouted from that. But there may be also a North American origin for some of these other varieties as well, because we do see such a widespread importance of this plant throughout North and South America and Central, because Central America is the thing too. So it's likely that Datura stramonium and the other varieties have origins in North America. In Mexico, Datura stramonium is considered a younger sister to Datura anoxia, but it is used in much the same way. So I think that this kind of suggests perhaps a later arrival of Datura stramonium in Mexico. So the anoxia most likely being the native variety in the Americas, which is very, very closely related to Datura Mattel. Datura is a powerful poison, spiritual and physical medicine. It is one of the most important ceremonial power plants in North America and has traditions of use among indigenous people in the North and the South. Datura is revered as a master plant spirit and great teacher, one that must be approached with respect. Some fates may seem worse than death, and 3 days of paranoid madness may come close. Datura is a medicinal and low-dose herb that is used in ceremony for rites of passage. It is a plant of transition, transformation, and a powerful catalyst for change. A shapeshifter with many different masks, Datura can be a reassuring grandmother spirit or a literal monster. So I think that the reason that Datura has so many kind of monstrous or demonic connections or these associations with these very terrifying, fear-filled kind of experiences is because that is literally part of Datura's medicine, and can be kind of honed in a way that is not traumatic to the person or the people around them, but it's literally able to kind of manifest and morph into our fears and bring them up to the surface so that they can exist outside of us, so that we can then turn and face them and kind of deal with them and process them in a way that is, you're taking it outside of yourself. So you're able to kind of separate from that trauma, separate from the anxiety, and kind of encounter it as its own individual thing. And Datura is very, very helpful with that. But I would definitely recommend, especially working with Datura on an entheogenic level, that it works really well when combined with other plant spirits, but not so much by itself. And I think Datura alone is where some of these really, really intense kind of stories come from. And they're generally from people that were working with it in a recreational way anyway. So really like seeking a very dramatic kind of perceptual change, which is not necessary to work with the plant spirit to get this to happen. So if you do kind of push too hard and go that far, it can be a really kind of traumatic and disturbing experience for people that don't know what they're doing or how to integrate or to get that additional kind of support and balance. And so that's where combining traditionally, specifically with Datura, things like tobacco, which is going to have that very protective element, clearing of energy, grounding, things like that. Another thing that I like to do when working with the poisons, the baneful herbs, is to balance them out with herbs that are supportive for the heart. So it's like some of my favorites and go-to ones just because they're safe and easy and I don't have to worry about like what I'm mixing with is rose petals. I powder those down, put those in a lot of different things. Teas, smoking blends, cacao is really awesome for like before, during, and after ceremony. And there's some other like herbal tea combinations and things that are really nice that kind of balance it out. So it's awesome to work with them on an individual basis, but they also do really, really well in partnership with other plant allies. So like I said, working with Datura can be very intense. In shadow work, it helps with fear-based anxiety, aggressive behaviors, which are also fear-based, paranoia, nightmares, and these can all result as symptoms of this sort of intense spiritual work that's happening. So all of these characteristics of shadow work are also characteristics of things that can come up when working with Datura entheogenically. Can cause aggression, paranoia, brings out all of the nasty kind of stuff. And that makes sense as to why Datura is traditionally used in a lot of rites of passage rituals or initiations. Often, taking younger boys into manhood or various different kind of shamanic initiations in the plant medicine world. But Datura is very much a plant of initiation. So it helps to kind of channel a lot of this aggressive, masculine, fiery kind of pent up energy that is moving around during the time of life when a person would go through this rite of passage. So because it has that sort of homeopathic or like curing like kind of a sympathy, it's able to support that transition, so that a lot of these energies and spirits are able to move and to come out and to be expressed how they need to be expressed and do what they need to do, so that they're not all bottled up inside, which is kind of one of the main reasons for working with plant spirit medicine, is to help kind of unravel some of this stuff that has been caught up inside of us because we've forgotten how to process and to move it. So the plant allies help with that. When we choose to do shadow work, we're plunged into the darker parts of ourselves, and sometimes lash out in resistance. Datura helps with this, teaching us how to transmute toxic patterns, environmental influences, and toxic attachments. So I have been working with a Datura infused honey all week, and I just take a little bit on my fingertip like every day, a couple times a day, or whenever I feel like I need it, just to constantly have sort of the Datura spirit in and around me, especially leading up to these classes. I like to really work with a specific plant ally in that way, and I've definitely noticed like some little bit of anger coming out and lashing out and kind of turning up things that I thought were put to rest. But I think we also had an Aries moon recently, and I also have an Aries moon. So maybe like combined with that, it was a little bit more fiery than normal. So Datura can be utilized to open up our perception, but it does that through opening our energy channels, clearing our meridians and the different energy lines that run through our body, literally clearing away any kind of anything obscuring our vision or getting in the way of our sight so that we can see things clearly and truly. So it was used medicinally as an effective treatment for asthma. So we see Datura inhalers, Datura cigarettes, different smoking blends that have been used up into the 19th, 20th century probably still in some places because it is just an effective asthma treatment. So it paralyzes all of those little bronchioles in there and helps to open up the airways. I am not a clinical herbalist or have an understanding of medical action, so I'm just kind of talking based on what I know with that. But the point that I'm getting to is that it opens up the airways, but it also opens up our energetic pathways. So incorporating Datura into a smoking blend, even in very small amounts, is really, really helpful for kind of clearing out the energy pathways to allow for insight, gnosis, ancestral communication, spiritual connection, any of those things. So just in the same way that it opens up the airways, it also opens up other paths of communication. So it kind of tunes the receiver to be able to take in information, energy, or whatever it is that is being transmitted. So in this way, it can also be utilized to break through blockages and stagnant energy of various types, whether that's an attachment or, just low vibration energy that needs to be moved out of the space, smudging, all super effective with Datura. So just looking at the fact that it has been used to treat asthma medicinally, that these were at one point, manufactured and made into cigarettes and sold to people and then kind of took off the market because people were tripping on them. But there is a precedent for people smoking this, ingesting it in various different ways, depending on what time period and part of the world that we're looking at. But it's always something that's definitely done with caution. Just my little disclaimer, everything done at your own risk, and we're all kind of the last threshold to what we allow to come into our bodies. But trying to just kind of dispel this idea of, that these things are just too out of our reach to even attempt to work with. But when we look at even the very recent history, there is definitely some wiggle room for further exploration. So working with Datura, of course, it is obviously a member of the nightshade family, the Solanaceae, and like all other members of that family, the potent ones, care is needed when working with Datura. Datura should not be taken internally unless under the direction of a qualified practitioner. Datura can be applied topically, can be applied for grounding, relaxation, sedation, and to draw out unwanted energies. This could be done in the form of an ointment or salve, an infused oil. You could even do a water infusion, literally washing with the Datura infused water. If we're looking at it for grounding, relaxation, and kind of drawing things out, super effective to apply it to the soles of the feet. Or if there is a specific area, maybe a specific energy center or part of the body that for whatever reason you're kind of called to, work more in that area, kind of applying it there. And it's going to have that drawing action that all Saturnian herbs have, because they attract and contract and draw everything into them. So they're going to essentially suck out that unwanted energy. The reason I say that it should not be taken internally, this is more for like water infusions, teas, eating the leaves and things like that. That's going to be a totally different ballgame than using it in a smoking blend or an incense or a flying ointment or a infused oil or something like that. And that's not really something that I talk about or teach people how to do online. But that's just something to be said, like with all the nightshades. I'm trying to kind of share personal experience and just what I've learned in the past 10, 12 years doing this. but also like being like very clear, like don't eat the stuff, don't drink it, because it's a totally different animal that you're dealing with at that point. So definitely not responsible for any crazy scenarios that come out of that. I've written about a couple of mine. But the applying to the feet, applying, infusions. So basically like taking some Datura leaves or Datura flowers and making an infusion and putting that in a bath or like putting it over the feet. This is something that I write about in the Poison Path Herbal a little bit more. Helps with exhaustion, stress, soothing energy. And this was essentially something that I came across that was used by the Chumash people in California, in North America. And I write about the specifics of it in more detail in the book, but essentially taking fresh Datura flowers and making a foot soak. So we know that like the feet are very absorptive. They soak everything up. We hold a lot of toxins in our feet and things like that. And also the feet connect to a lot of other parts of the body. So when we apply things there, we get sort of a systemic effect, a body-wide kind of effect. But because we're not actually putting it inside of ourselves, we have that barrier, it's a little bit safer. So doing these foot soaks or these foot massages with the different Datura infused oils or putting the flying ointments on the feet is just a super, super grounding, relaxing, awesome for stress relief. If we're just talking about like medicinal physical effects of it, it's one of my favorite ways to work with nightshade ointment is just putting it on my feet. But it's also really effective for underworld travel. So chthonic workings, kind of descent down into the world tree, as opposed to climbing its branches. So when we apply the flying ointment to our feet, drawing ourselves down deeper into those kind of lower vibration realms of the dead, land spirits, earth spirits, terrestrial spirits, pretty much anything under the moon. That we could connect with in a chthonic way. Datura has many spiritual applications, from cleansing and banishing to soul retrieval and working through ancestral trauma. It teaches us to tap into our unconscious through dreams and waking visions. It is a formidable ally. It brings fear to our demons, chases away harmful spirits and maleficia. Datura is utilized in many of the same ways as tobacco. So for sending prayers, for cleansing, for protection, for all of those things. So working with the two in combination has been super helpful, because we have sort of the very fiery Mars-like energy of the grandfather spirit of tobacco, combined with the, in this case, very lunar grandmother energy of the Datura. So kind of creating a really powerful balance between these feminine and masculine, lunar and solar types of energies. And when we get that kind of going in combination as well, it really just enhances, one enhances the effects of the other. So we're talking about like smoking blends, incense, stuff like that. You're not having to put a whole bunch of one specific plant in there, because you've got this blend that is now synergizing, working together, helping it to be more effective, more potent, but also to kind of, cancel out some of the more unwanted side effects. So you can really formulate things to help the plant allies like work better for you. So like they're already showing up, they're already doing all of this stuff and bringing all of this energy and power. So, we can at least like make a formulation that helps them a little bit and makes it a little bit easier for them to do what they need to do. Just some planetary and elemental correspondences that I kind of wrote on here for Datura. But this one is really tricky to pin down because it is a trickster and a shapeshifter and just manifests like all of them and kind of blows like traditional planetary correspondence out of the water. So the first and foremost, we've got Saturn, because all poisonous plants are ruled by Saturn. And it's also got white flowers and heavy roots, but they're not really tiny white flowers. So I wouldn't say that's not so much a Saturnian characteristic for this one. Of course, Mars, because of the thorns on the apples. We could also attribute that to kind of the aggression associated with it. We can see the moon or lunar associations coming through from the fact that it blooms at nighttime. It's typically pollinated by moths and other nighttime flying creatures. So very much associated with the creatures of the night, nighttime birds, shapeshifters in that regard. So we could connect to the moon there. Datura also has a lot of Venusian associations. And we see this with pretty much all of the nightshades as well. They kind of have like this dark Saturnian side, but then they also have the Venusian love magic, aphrodisiac, sex magic, seductive sort of side to them. And that is also the case for Datura. It has been used and is still used as an aphrodisiac around the world. A traditional formula in Mexico made from Datura inoxia is called jugo de toloache, which is essentially just juice of Datura. So that is a formula that's used in love magic, love spells, manipulative love magic, everything sort of within that realm. We also see Datura and its alkaloids being used in different underworld circles, sex workers. It's usually kind of in a criminal context, so I don't even want to like connect the two. But it has been used by prostitutes, sex workers, other people to kind of rob or make a target or a victim more susceptible or more open to whatever the person was trying to do to them. But we could say that for all of the nightshades, going all the way back to antiquity, kind of being used in a manipulative love magic kind of a way. So Datura and its related species have ethnopharmacological uses wherever it's found around the world. So it's been used to treat everything from skin eruptions to asthma, to being in an anesthetic, motion sickness. So really very, very, very versatile. Most commonly, it is known for its anesthetic and analgesic properties. So being used as a pain reliever, both topically and in some cases internally, to relieve pain in traditional herbal medicine. Datura also has a very high scopolamine content, which is valuable to the pharmaceutical industry. I think for a while, I think maybe up until around World War II, we used to get all of our scopolamine containing nightshade more so from like Eastern Europe, like Bulgaria, Romania. But then after that, we kind of switched over to Datura because it was easier to grow. In the last class, I put up a picture, I think it was from the early 20th century, maybe like 1912, 1902 or something like that, where it showed a field of belladonna that was being grown by the Eli Lilly Company. So nightshades have been grown on a mass commercial scale for quite a long time, and they still are. And a lot of the majority of the nightshades that are grown commercially are grown specifically for the pharmaceutical industry. So for the isolation and extraction of their alkaloids. And that's because they're anti-inflammatory, analgesic, antispasmodic, mydriatic, used to treat injuries related to muscle pain, nerve pain, painful joints. So all of these just very, very common, like things that like everybody at some point is going to have to deal with in their life. So I mentioned its use as an aphrodisiac. And it is still used in modern medicine in the motion sickness patches, the scopolamine patches. And if you put too many of them on, you won't be able to see for a few days. So yeah, that's still around. Even the belladonna plasters. I know this class isn't about belladonna, but you can still get belladonna plasters like on Amazon, and they're essentially like medicated pain patches that have tropane alkaloids on them. And just super duper effective for pain. Just don't put more than one on at a time. Make the slideshow without the controls. Yes, I'm sorry. I will do that. I'm making the slideshow without the controls because I'm sure those are probably distracting. But then I hope it doesn't slow down my clicking. It is 6:45. I want to do like a 5-minute break, maybe like a 2 to 5 minute break. So I can use the restroom and give you guys a minute to move around. If anyone has any questions that you want to put up in the chat while we break, and I'll answer those right when we come back. There's a few more pages to get through, and then I will answer any questions that you guys have. All right, awesome. The sun is also gone down, so it got pitch black in here and I need to see what I'm doing. Yay, okay. If you missed the belladonna class, someone was asking if there would be an option to purchase the recording. I technically have the recording for all of the classes, so if you guys did miss one of them and you would like it again, just shoot me an email or message and I can work it out and get it to you. Just real quick too, the Patreon subscribers on the Pharmacos tier get access to all of my classes that I do, all of the live recordings and such. So if you're wanting to, there's that as well. The connection between Datura and Cain. So it's not really between Datura and Cain. The real connection with the mark of Cain is typically with hemlock, poison hemlock, because it has green stems, but it gets this purple kind of splotchiness. So it's marked. And that's how you know that it is poison hemlock. That is associated with Cain, the figure known as the first farmer. That is an important sort of spirit on the crooked path, associated with green practitioners, and loosely with traditional witchcraft as well. Cain is sort of a patron spirit, known for killing his brother Abel. He did that because God did not accept Cain's sacrifice or offering, because he was a farmer. He basically offered up his harvest, where his brother Abel killed and slaughtered a goat, basically. And God was happy with that and not with Cain's offering. So Cain killed Abel. And after that, he was forever marked and cursed and made an outsider. And Cain has a lot of association with like the witch mythos, the witch archetype, also vampire mythology. So just kind of like an obscure but important kind of poison path figure. So I make that connection between the purple splotching on hemlock and also the purple color on Datura metel and some of the Datura stramonium tatula. Making that connection is kind of my own thing. So if you're interested in Cain, interested in working with Cain, the first farmer, would look at poison hemlock. That's kind of a little one I'm kind of still delving into myself. The Datura that I usually grow has more of a rounded leaf. However, I've seen one with a more pointy leaf, and I'm assuming there are different varieties, but I'm not sure which is which. Okay, so the ones that are sold in like garden centers and as ornamentals are typically going to be some type of variety of Datura metel, which is going to have the purple trumpet-shaped flowers. Sometimes they are double, so one flower inside another. Sometimes you'll get lucky and you'll have three, but those are typically purple. They also come in yellows, some other hues. Those typically have the more pointy serrated leaves, and that's Datura metel. Datura stramonium also has really pointy and jagged leaves, but the stramonium leaves are typically smaller than the Datura metel leaves. If you have leaves that are more oval shaped, more rounded, those are typically going to be Datura inoxia or Datura wrighti. And a lot of times they're kind of fuzzy. I'm sorry, I leave the chat up there. This is actually a picture of Anoxia, and you can kind of see in the background, like the leaves are almost like a silvery grayish green color. And they're a lot smoother on the outer edges than the Mattel or the Stramonium.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the ones I have, the flower is all white, and the leaves are kind of oval shaped, not very jagged.
Yeah, that's
yeah, that's the Datura Anoxia.
More than likely, and they're really similar to Mattel. Yeah, yep.
And the Mattel are the purple ones?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I have those too.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
They are. Which one do you think is the most powerful or the best to work with?
Well, I think that kind of depends on who you ask, because we're either working with an individual spirit of a specific plant, or we're working with a individual spirit of a specific plant to connect to kind of the overarching genius of the entire species. So that's when they kind of all get lumped into together and act as like the Datura spirit. It kind of, I guess you could base it on what you're trying to do, what you're trying to connect with. There, may be a more of a powerful association with Datura Mattel, depending on the energies or spirits that you're working with. You may feel more of a powerful association to Stramonium. So just kind of the tradition or the paradigm that you're working within. But chemically, Anoxia is known for being pretty strong. Mattel is as well. They have a slightly different chemical composition, the Datura Mattel.
Okay, thank you.
But across the board, they will all contain the same combination of tropane alkaloids. So they're all going to have scopolamine, atropine, ioscyamine, iosine, all of those various different compounds. And Datura is one too that really has a very high kind of variation in its alkaloid content across the board. So if we're kind of looking at which variety is the most powerful chemistry wise, I would look toward Mattel or Anoxia, just because I think those are probably the oldest cultivars and the ones that have been used ceremonially for the longest, where the Stramoniums are maybe a little bit more of they've been wild for a little longer. So I think they can be a little bit more unreliable. There was one more question about the name of the formula from Mexico, the Jugo de Toloache. So pop that in there. That's good. Questions are awesome because there's just so much to say about all of these, and there's so many different varieties. And I try and cram it all in and give beginner info and other info. So here we have a Datura Mattel flower that is not completely open yet. So it's kind of going through this little stage, and it reminds me of like bat wings almost. All right, getting back to you. So very important ethnobotanical plant throughout the Americas. Ceremonial vessels resembling Datura pods have been found in archaeological sites across North America. New research is bringing to light the scale of the importance this plant held to Native American cultures historically, as well as its widespread use. Thornapple was allegedly one of the ingredients in the witch's flying ointment, along with many of the other members of the Solanaceae family. It has sedative, hypnotic, and visionary qualities, but can also cause aggression, excitability, and amnesia. And this is kind of like the dual-edged sword of the tropane alkaloids. So lower doses being more sedative, more aphrodisiac, more relaxing. And then we kind of get into the higher doses, which are much more excitable, can cause aggression, delirium, hallucination. And then once we crest over that, then we kind of get into the realm of like coma and death and etc. Thorn apple is used in shamanic rituals to travel to other worlds, to travel to the past, or even to travel inside of their patients to achieve healing. Thorn apple is employed in divination rituals. Its entheogenic effects allowing the practitioner to communicate with spirits, deities, and to see into the other side. So it could be employed this way in a couple of different ways for its divinatory use. So this could be smoking blends, incense, actually consumed or ingested prior to the ritual itself, or used more as like a smudging and kind of atmospheric incense blend. So just like the pre-rolls that I make, they don't have to be smoked. You can just kind of light one and let it burn like an incense too, or break it apart and put it on a charcoal. So it's still kind of getting that smoke inhalation from the ambient environment, but it's not, as concentrated of a thing. So you can do it in that way. Blowing the smoke to actually direct the energy. A lot of different ways that we can kind of employ the smoke in different ritual uses. Datura has been used to break spells and to destroy evil witchcraft and sorcery. There's also a mention of a use of Datura being used for divination in a way that is not entheogenic. So it's not being consumed for its psychoactive effects. And this is, I can remember the source off the top of my head. I wish it's probably, was it Gerald Gardner that did the Gypsy Magic book, or Raymond Buckland? But there was a folkloric use mentioned, taking the seeds of Datura and sprinkling them on a drum that was marked in a certain way, and then beating the drum to create vibrations that would make the seeds move around, and then their position would then kind of determine the answer. So some potential there for divinatory use, outside of actual entheogenic ritual. So in the same way as tobacco, Syrian rue, a lot of these other power plants being used to destroy evil witchcraft, break incantations, just break spells in general, as a common kind of pattern that I've been noticing in a lot of these power plants, especially they're using their seeds in various ways, whether it is holding the seeds in your mouth while you're speaking an incantation, or doing some kind of banishing ritual. Another technique could be, if you're working with another person, literally having the seeds in your mouth as you are using your breath to kind of draw different energies, spiritual attachments and things like that out through the breath, but having the seeds in the mouth to then protect and transmute, and kind of combining the essence or power of that plant spirit with the power of the breath. Thorn apple has a lot of magical associations, a lot of different correspondences, and a lot of potential for use in magical practice. And I think, like with all of the other nightshades, like really their potential for use in magical practice is pretty much unlimited. And Datura is a really good example of that. As we kind of saw, talking just a little bit about the planetary correspondences, it really is a shapeshifter, and it can be put in a position to kind of work from any of these different angles. So these are really master plant spirits and power plant allies that do have such an intimate association with witchcraft and magical practice that they are very much, willing to kind of bring support and aid to any type of working, whether that be malefic, healing, love magic, banishing, prosperity. It's all just sort of how everything is positioned. But specifically, thornapple is a great herb for protection magic. And that's because it combines the qualities of Saturn and Mars. So we get this really, really fiery, fast, and powerful initial effect from the protection spell when incorporating Datura. But we also have that very kind of slow acting, permanent, and long lasting effect from the Saturnian qualities that it has. Just looking sort of at the sympathetic magic with Datura, the seed pods make really awesome little protective charms that can be stuffed with protective herbs, resins, and you can sort of seal the top of them back up with wax, and then those can be like hung or placed in the home. And the Datura pods, when they are dry, they get really, really, really sharp. So they kind of remind me almost like a witch ball or witch's bottle, just with all of the really sharp pieces of glass and nails and things like that. So great for protection magic. Of course, sprinkling the seeds, powdering the leaves, can be done in different ways like that as well. Oh, in my opinion, it is the Datura stramonium that is the witchiest of all of the thornapple species. It's the species most associated with medieval European witchcraft. And looking at its appearance, it still has a very wild, scrappy look. So it's the most feral of all of the Datura varieties. It's not super ornate. It doesn't have these huge, like droopy, almost Venusian kind of leaves. It's very much a plant of the wild, the wayside, and the in-between places. So in this way, Datura stramonium is great for connecting with the spirit known as the Green Devil. Christopher Penczak wrote about the Green Devil pretty extensively in the Plant Spirit Familiar, but just kind of the idea of this adversarial and non-human force of nature that exists, that is sort of antithetical to civilization and colonization and society and all of these structures and things that we have in place. So as a plant practitioner, working with the spirit of the Green Devil to help kind of connect with that very primal, ancient energy for kind of breaking through a lot of these constructs and things that want to hold us in and keep us tame and domesticated and in a box essentially. And this plant is very much willing to tear all of that apart. The flowers of the thornapple, I mentioned, they open at nighttime. They typically only last for about a night. It seems like all of their smell almost comes out at once. So again, they're very much like, I'm here, I'm ready, attract all of the pollinators, and then the flowers go away. Like I mentioned earlier, it is connected to the moon, associated with nocturnal magic, darkness, creatures of the night. So it does kind of have this very mysterious lunar kind of delving into the shadows, into the darkness, into the subconscious. So again, as a divinatory herb, just helping to connect our psychic senses, while also helping us to see into other realities. And as an herb for seeing or for true sight, the nightshades are going to all be very helpful, because they all have that midriatic effect, which is the effect of pupil dilation. So they make our pupils bigger, specifically the atropine, which has been used in ophthalmology up until relatively recently, but it causes that pupil dilation. So allowing the maximum amount of light to enter into the eyes. So on a very kind of small energetic scale, essentially it is doing the same thing to our inner eye, our third eye, our spiritual eye, whatever you would like to call it. So when I kind of compare the spirits of the nightshade family or the spirits of the poison path, often describe Datura as sort of the psychedelic shaman of the nightshade family. So Belladonna being very much like the archetypal witch, the seductress, the energy of Lilith and Hecate, and all of that. Datura, to me, kind of manifests as this very, very like shamanic, earthy, almost kind of like hippie, psychedelic sort of a spirit. So it doesn't have like this really sinister, somber, Saturnian kind of side like we see with some of the other ones like Henbane or Deadly Nightshade. Where with Datura, it seems to be just very much all over the place. So willing to kind of partner with all of these other, entheogenic plant allies, from psychedelic mushrooms to other nightshades to tobacco. Very much kind of an intermediary, and also not only connecting us to other spiritual entities or consciousness, but also kind of in a way introducing us and connecting us to other plant allies as well. I have a recipe on here for a Datura stramonium ointment. This doesn't have to be Datura stramonium. You could use the same recipe with any of the Datura varieties. And like with all of my flying ointment or herbal salve recipes, I typically stick to a 1:10 ratio, which is pretty much what you'll see here on the recipe. I did do, for some reason, ounces and milliliters, but it is usually a 1:10. So whether I'm working with, I stopped doing the non-metric a while ago. 250 milliliters of carrier oil to 25 grams of plant material. If you're making like a really small amount, say like 1 ounce, you could do the math. It's been a long day. But 1:10 is typically the therapeutic dosage. 1:10 is typically what we see referred to in the majority of the herbals that do talk about plants like these, from in the past. When we get into like making tinctures and things that are meant for internal ingestion, then the mixing ratio typically goes up from 1:10 to 1:20 for tinctures. And there are all sorts of different ways to create these ointments and extracts. There are different ways to kind of enhance them, to get them to extract a little bit better or to absorb a little bit better. There's all kinds of different things that can be added to kind of help that process. And it's not so much like one being better than the other, just sort of different different ways that the alkaloids behave, that through either changing the pH or adding alcohol or an acid or an alkaline or something like that, that you're able to create something that works a little bit more effectively. So if you are making any kind of infused oil using any plant, any of the nightshade family, I typically will begin by powdering the dry plant material. And I don't do like a long cold infusion with nightshades because that doesn't really work. You want to do it on heat or do one of the intermediary methods that I talk about. And I explain it a little bit more in detail in the handout. And I talk about this stuff a lot on Patreon. And that kind of gets a little bit more in depth. So I'm not going to go too in depth on what to add and what not. Yeah, they're just a simple pain salve recipe. The apple cider vinegar and the vodka that you'll see there, those help with the extraction. That's just an example of something that could be added to almost create kind of like a liniment or like a combination of a tincture and a salve or an infused oil. So you're getting both benefits of the acid and the alcohol, which help to extract and also to help with absorption through the skin, because that is important as well. Because it's one thing to get the tropane alkaloids to extract into the oil, but then it's another thing to actually get them to go into our skin. And beeswax will never, ever, ever do it. So flying ointments typically used for shamanic journeying, spirit flight, spirit communication, divination, things like that, very abstract, where we're either connecting to sort of the unconscious or working in more of a visionary sense. But flying ointments can also be employed just like we would any other kind of a spell formula or ritual formula, whether it is using it to draw specific symbols. Another way that I like to work with flying ointments is actually apply them to my hands before spell work or before energy work, to kind of add that additional layer of whatever the formula is, plant energy, to your literal hands while you're working with them. So lots of different ways that you can work with flying ointments. Doesn't have to be for spirit flight or going to the witch's Sabbath or anything like that. They're essentially spell oils that we made thicker with beeswax or carnauba wax or animal fat or something like that. So there is that one way that you can use them, but we're also allowed to use them in all of the other ways that we literally use, like all of our other magical formulas. See some questions. Raymond Buckland, thank you. How do I categorize henbane? Are we talking like character categorization? So character categorization for henbane is he comes through as like this weird, like an old man, like a creepy little old man, like kind of sinister and sadistic. Like henbane very much is like the herb of death, the herb of necromancy, the herb of the dead. And it's just like over and over and over again, death, 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 death. But then it also has like this really kind of joyful and almost like what we could associate with Jupiter or the sun, with planetary correspondences. So again, we get an example of just like how dualistic these plants are. So you've got like on one hand, sort of their dark demonized side representing things that we fear. And then on the other hand, you kind of get like the opposite of that, But they don't generally show you the opposite of that until you get through the dark and nasty part first. So on the alternate end of henbane, henbane was associated with the Celtic deity Belenus, which is a solar deity. Also used in beer brewing, so for intoxication. Where am I going with this? So it's got like this really kind of like kooky, like joyful side too. So like the whole main message and medicine with henbane is to not fear the dead and not to fear death, to make it a joyful thing. It's more celebratory with henbane. And I think when we want to communicate with the dead, we want to practice necromancy, it takes on this very kind of like taboo and sinister kind of a vibe. But what if your necromancy is wanting to talk to your grandma on her birthday after she's been dead for 10 years? That doesn't have to be dark, it doesn't have to be spooky. And that's one thing that henbane is really, really good at. It's willing to go into the underworld, to go into the river Styx, and to literally, pull people out to help them forget all of the pains of their former lives. So it's all about kind of this transition and support through death and mourning. So henbane, is very much like, I don't know if you guys have seen The Sandman on Netflix, but like their portrayal of the spirit of death is very much like in alignment, I think, with the spirit of henbane. It's just a very kind of nurturing, supportive, just wanting to help us through that. So that'll be for the next class on henbane in 3 months. Yeah, someone asked a question about henbane in the chat, so I was just responding to that. I will do a class on henbane, but it's probably not going to be until like summertime or maybe even into the fall, because I'm back to back. Traditional uses of the roots. I'm glad that somebody brought this up. I don't have any like specific, these people did this with the roots for this reason in my notes. And just off of the top of my head, I don't really know of any very specific uses of the roots. But I did want to bring this up because like we get so kind of infatuated with mandrake roots and wanting to work with that as plant familiar vessel, or for housing of other spirits, or just to kind of work that familiar spirit relationship. But when we look at the roots of a lot of these daturas, they really resemble almost exactly what we see with mandrake, and same with belladonna. Like a lot of them grow in very, very similar ways. Doesn't necessarily get like super meaty like mandrake root, but it does have very much a humanoid shape. And I have some roots like I could show you guys too. Essentially, working with it in the same way that you would a mandrake. Even like ginseng roots. Ginseng is one that you wouldn't like think of as being super magical, but when we look into Chinese lore, it's got almost exactly the same magical associations and medicinal uses as mandrake, and it looks almost exactly the same. Which is also the reason why if you buy mandrake root on eBay, you will get ginseng. But the point being that roots are vessels for the plant spirit's consciousness. Like the roots are the seat of their soul. So working with them in that way, forming that relationship, making regular offerings, having that one root that you work with, is a very powerful and important thing. But there are all sorts of different plants that make roots that we can work with in that way. And Datura is definitely one of them. the best part of the plant to use for incense? That is a good question. I typically will do the leaves just because they're easier to work with. So, and that's another important thing too. Even if you're making like small amounts of stuff, taking all of your leaves, like all of your plant material from one harvest, and then kind of like mixing and powdering all of that together. That way you don't, try to make a couple pre-rolls with this one leaf, and then a month or two later use a totally different leaf and get like a totally different effect. So once it's all dried out, once you have like your larger amount that you're going to use for however many months that lasts, grinding it all up, mixing it all up, just to get all of that sort of as like evenly mixed or like standardized as possible. That way you're not just like essentially plucking random leaves off of the plant, because the alkaloid content can really vary in like crazy ways. Research shows that the seeds are also typically incorporated into smoking blends. This is not something that I've personally tried or that I would recommend trying, because the seeds are generally like the most potent part. And usually when you read any of the horror stories about smoking Datura, they were smoking the seeds. So with that, the seeds are typically like roasted a little bit, which sort of helps to bring the oils out and kind of decarb them in a way, but also just like making them easier to crush up. So there's not like literally full seeds in your smoking blend or your incense. Yeah, that's a really good question. I would definitely just stick to leaves and plant material in incense and smoking blends. The seeds, like I really just use the seeds to grow more plants and then like magical stuff. Okay, and I've got one more thing on my notes to kind of talk about. And this is a newer thing, something that I've kind of noticed for a while, but I've never really like written about it or put anything together regarding it. This is going to be in the new book, The Poison Path Grimoire. And it's kind of almost along the lines of like self-flagellation or any number of like trance-inducing techniques, through pain or through changing sensations or repetitive sensory input, things like that, create alterations in our consciousness and our perception, and all of that. So this is one way that I've kind of figured out that Datura can help us to do that. And I noticed it through like every time I would pick up any of the plant material, I would get all of these weird, almost like electrical shocks or like tingles. And it's kind of subsided a little bit over the years, so I might just be developing a tolerance, but I still notice it anytime I hold the seed pods. And they are super sharp, so you want to be careful like when you do this, but just take it. The dry ones work the best, but I don't know if they're on video or not. Can you guys see me?
Yeah, we can see you, but it's just from your nose down.
Okay, that's because I can see you. We got a little Datura pod here. You can see like some of them are really, really long and really, really sharp. So essentially, Datura finger pricking is sitting with the Datura pod and just kind of gently holding it, touching it, looking at it, essentially, using it as a meditative focal point or mandala. So the dried Dried pods of Datura are covered in tiny spines, which become like sharp needles when dried. Handling these dried pods often accidentally prick your fingers and notice strange tingling sensation traveling up the arms, which is similar to the effects of urtication or self-flagellation with stinging nettles, for its various healing, detoxifying, and trance-inducing effects. So these similar sensations felt when handling Datura are not due to the spines alone, but also due to the presence of tropane alkaloids entering the bloodstream when pricked. This is going to be like a very, very minute, like trace amount, so more energetic than anything. But some people may find this sensation irritating and find that it sticks with you. There may be some redness or itching that kind of follows, but that is normal. In this case, we're purposely pricking our fingers by handling a dry Datura pod. And as we do, ask the Datura spirit to share its power and wisdom with us for whatever it is that we're trying to do. This could be to get into a meditative state to connect with the plant spirit or other allies, or it could be worked as a personal cleansing and grounding ritual. So that sensation really just kind of bringing you back into the body. And you can hold it in one hand and kind of squeeze it with pressure without hurting yourself. So we're not like, the goal is not to crush it in your hand as hard as you possibly can, but to just kind of squeeze it until you can kind of feel the potential for puncture with some of those little spines. This can also work as a technique to draw the healing energy of the plant spirit into your hands and then to apply it to another person through hands-on healing techniques. So often if you sit with this after you've done this for a little while and then put it back down, like you will still feel all of the blood that came to the surface, all of those little individual pokes, and just sort of that residual tingling feeling. The easiest way to do this, just sitting in a comfortable position with the dry pod, with the tip of your thumb and forefingers, just rotating it in different directions. So you're really essentially just playing with it and kind of rolling it around in your fingers. While you're doing this, you can close your eyes, meditate on the details, holding onto the pod the entire time, or just until you have made, just until you feel you have made a connection. The idea is not to stab yourself and draw blood. And just by handling the pod in this way, you'll inadvertently poke yourself without trying to, so you don't have to be super aggressive. And I did poke myself a little bit harder than I meant to accidentally. And as soon as I do that, like, I'm not sure if it's all to just the pain response, but I can literally feel like almost like a rush of blood flow that goes all the way up the arm, and then you can feel it like connect into your heart through just like that little bit of a pain response. For healing purposes, to remove trauma, illness spirits, and stagnant energy, holding the pod between your hands, the lightest pressure, like that. And once you have achieved this sensation, you can put the pod down and use your hands for healing as you normally would, placing them on or over specific areas. So you'll generally feel like a lot of heat and blood flow coming to the hands, energy coming to the hands with the blood. So just kind of a way to incorporate and direct more of that plant spirit energy and kind of amping up the healing technique with that additional blood flow and movement. Going for a more direct method would combine this technique with also pricking the person that's getting the healing. So this could be something as far as taking the pod and gently tapping the palms and backs of their hands, arms, legs, or focusing on a specific area. Of course, being careful not to break the skin. So this breaking through stagnant energies, bringing blood and life force to the surface and moving it through the body. Also infusing with the energy of the plant spirit medicine of Datura. So this could be done over energy centers, palms of the hands, essentially anywhere where you're really wanting to bring that flow into. Close up of a leaf. Yes. Does anybody have any other questions, any specific questions or things that I didn't talk about specifically? I know I just like vomit a bunch of information and jump all over the places because there's so many different things to talk about. But if there's anything specific that you would like to know, I'm happy to share. You guys also should have received an email with the links for suggested reading, just some different resources and articles specifically pertaining to Datura. Yeah, if you are missing the email with the handout, please send me an email. Please send me an email because I won't remember from here to there. Fabulous. Yeah, everyone should have gotten a handout with the notes and then also a separate handout with the links to other messages. If anyone has any other questions about Datura or literally like anything else, I'm happy to help you guys. There's my email address, Travis. thepoisonersapothecary@gmail.com. Happy to answer any questions. When using small amounts topically, ointment or oil, do you personally notice any of the autonomic effects such as heart rate or blood pressure changes? I couldn't say that I've noticed anything like that from topical application. The most that I've ever noticed from a topical application was, just like a real pronounced sort of sense of weight or heaviness, groundedness that we could even equate, to sedation. But I've not personally noticed anything like that. Working with them internally in smoking blends and in some instances in the past in teas, I've noticed more of an effect on blood pressure, heart rate. That's when you get into like the hot as a hare, red as a beet, blind as a bat. A lot of those more dramatic, like uncomfortable tropane alkaloid associations are from internal ingestion of some kind. There are a few more articles floating around out there on Datura. If you go to my blog, patheos.com/blog/poisonersapothecary, go to the poison path tab. Those articles have been up there for a little while, but I know there is one on Datura and gender and being a shapeshifter, and just kind of like gender and plants in general. Also got just like an information dump on Datura lore in general. patheos.com/blogs/poisonersapothecary. Cool. Awesome. Well, I think we did it. Samples have been sent out to all of the domestic US. The few that signed up over the past couple of days, those samples are going to be coming out to you as well. And I think in addition to the oil, I might have put like Datura seeds or maybe the Datura smoking blend in there. I do have a Datura smoking blend, but it's not on the website. It's one that I really only offer to Patreon, and I put it in my last collection. But that one is a blend of Datura, Amanita muscaria, lotus, and skullcap. And the Datura and the Amanita work really well together because the tropane alkaloids and the muscarinic alkaloids act to synergize and enhance and make one another work better. But they also help to kind of knock out some of the more uncomfortable side effects. So when you get into like higher doses, one of the worst things about working with nightshades is you get this really intense need to urinate, but you can't. The opposite is true of Amanita, where if you work with too much Amanita, you will probably pee your pants. So combining the two together, they kind of neutralize, make it a much more pleasant experience. It goes deeper than that, but that's just kind of like the funny way that their chemistry is complementary. But they do work synergistically. So that is the trickster indeed. I hope you guys enjoyed the class. I know it's a lot of info, and I am happy to answer anybody's like individual questions that you might have on formulation or just like whatever it is that you're trying to do. So feel free to reach out for me. Reach out with me, reach out to me. Jesus, I need to get off here. It's been a busy week with lots of processing, and I'm sorry for you all just seeing my nose. So have a good night. Let me know if you need anything, and I will be sending out links to everyone with the recordings. And yeah, happy to help in any other regard. Thank you guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. It was a great class.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Mhm.
I might just end it.